This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
President Xi Jinping says China will continue to pursue development with the rest of the world at the start of a virtual AIIB meeting. West African regional leaders recommend the formation of a unity government to stabilize Mali. And Uganda puts more emphasis on stopping mother-to-child transmission to contain the spread of hepatitis B. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, and joining me in studio with the business headlines is Uche.
Thanks, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. An independent review clears President of the African Development Bank, Akinwumi Adesina. And 90% of chief executives in South Africa invest in new technology but can't access the right talent. Of course, more on that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has kicked off its two-day annual meeting. Chinese President Xi Jinping addressed the opening ceremony of the event, calling for multilateralism and regional cooperation. Participants will also discuss the coronavirus pandemic and its effects on global economy. Our reporter Wei Lin Tang has more.
The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is celebrating 5 years since its founding in 2016.
And in its virtual annual meeting today, Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for the multilateral bank to step up and be a new platform that promotes development for all of its now 103 member countries. One that progresses with the times and one that performs highly in terms of international cooperation.
全球抗击新冠肺炎疫情的实践表明
The global response to COVID-19 has made it clear that mankind rises and falls together. Mutual support and cooperation and solidarity are the only ways for mankind to overcome crises. To address issues emerging in the course of economic globalization, countries should pursue more inclusive global governance, more effective multilateral institutions, and more robust regional cooperation. In this context, the AIIB should grow into a new platform that promotes development for all its members and facilitates the building of a community with a shared future for mankind.
The AIIB has been actively providing COVID-19 related funding to help its members resolve economic and public health problems. It has established a crisis recovery facility to provide member states with financial support. $5.9 billion in financing has been approved so far to support 12 members, with a leeway of up to $13 billion for both public and private sector entities.
We actually intended to expand into health sector as a plan we had a couple of years ago. But the COVID-19 pandemic has pushed forward the schedule of our engagement with countries in health sector. Another area we would do is the digital development. As you see, the board has recently approved the digital strategy. We would like to close the gap of digital divide.
At the meeting, President and Chairman Jin Liqun was re-elected for another 5-year term, starting on January 16, 2021.
One of the key takeaways from the online press conference that just happened is that the AIIB is eager to get back to normal business, to funding normal infrastructure projects as soon as possible. This comes as the bank seeks to not only help contain the virus, but also to help its member countries maintain economic growth. Wei Lin Tang, CGTN, Beijing.
The AIIB has grown into a multilateral development bank since its establishment 4 years ago. The bank currently has 102 member states covering all continents except Antarctica. Most of the states are developing countries. Over 80 projects have been approved by the AIIB since 2016. The total investment of the financing institution has surpassed $19 billion so far. Most of the money has gone into 5 areas, including energy, transportation, finance, water conservancy, and urban construction. The China Civil Engineering Construction Company says it is close to completing an important railway project in Nigeria. This is the second phase of the ambitious Lagos-Kano Railway Modernization Project. The project is expected to link the country's commercial capital of Lagos to the southwestern city of Ibadan. Deji Badmas with the rest of the details.
Racing against time to complete what is perhaps the most important railway project in Nigeria. The contract for the construction of the Lagos-Ibadan Railway project was awarded in 2012 and scheduled for completion in just 3 years. But bureaucratic and funding delays mean the project is still under construction 8 years after it was awarded. The government had announced the project was going to be completed in April, but the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic changed everything.
Even the locomotive and coaches that were brought in, we could not organize the commissioning and training, so we cannot be in a hurry and endanger our workers' life.
Even though no new completion date has been given, both the government and the Chinese firm handling the project say the Lagos-Ibadan standard gauge rail line will become operational by the end of the year. About 80% of imports into Nigeria actually come from the ports in this city. And the only means of moving these imports to other parts of the country is by road. And that's the reason why hundreds of trucks flood this city every day to pick up goods, thereby causing pollution and traffic congestion in the process. But when the rail line eventually becomes operational, most of the goods from the ports will be ferried by rail, thereby saving the city and the country the huge cost of ferrying goods by road and causing traffic congestion and pollution in the process.
If we are able to complete it to the port and shippers can now load directly to the rail, I think it will affect the economy of Nigeria and the commerce of Nigeria. And most times the companies say they are waiting for raw material and spare parts. We get them delivered to time. And at the same time, what we are exporting can go to the port through the rail.
Travel to the city of Ibadan from Lagos is now by road and from this rowdy bus back. Traveling from here is stressful for most passengers and still doesn't come cheap. Besides, the journey time could take up to 3 hours. But when the train becomes operational, that journey time would be cut by more than half. Some passengers say they can't wait.
Somebody should live at Shagamu and be able to work in Lagos. Somebody to be able to live at Ijebu-Ode or in Ambekuta and work in Lagos and work in VI if the train system is effective.
What will happen is that if this is planned well, it could become a continuous development corridor. So not just a transport corridor, but a development corridor. Because what you find is that you will dot all the capital cities in the trajectory would have industrial parks.
Many people are looking forward to the commencement of the standard gauge rail service. When that happens, it could lead to decongestion in the city. Deji Badmas, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
14 African countries are non-regional members and prospective members of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Let's now get you some perspective from Africa. I'm joined via Skype by David Owiro. He is an economic and political affairs consultant. David, thank you for joining us tonight. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping is calling for the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to become a new platform to build an international community with a shared future. How do African countries stand to benefit from this?
Yes, thank you for having me. I think, in my view, Africa stands to benefit from any initiative that brings together different countries, especially from the globe, in order to cement partnerships that further their trading arrangements and regimes. Africa, as you know, is a participant in the international global trading regimes, and most of Africa actually is not well connected or well plugged into international or global value chains. And so efforts that champion the challenges and solutions that cater for Africa are much welcome, and African countries stand to benefit.
International stakeholders and experts are discussing partnerships to connect markets in the 5th AIIB meeting. How can this be achieved on the African continent?
Well, there's a lot to gain from the agenda that is before the conference this week. There are two main things that they're talking about. One is bridging the digital infrastructure divide. And as we know, in Africa, we've got a huge infrastructure deficit, particularly when it comes to the opportunities that exist within the digital space. These are opportunities that range from e-commerce, essentially opportunities that facilitate or further inter-African trade. And so that Africa could stand to gain should there be a focus on also trying to bridge that divide within Africa. Secondly, the second focus is on attracting private equity funds to explore the opportunities that perhaps exist within this coronavirus pandemic that is with us. And so we know there has been a shift, not only in Africa, but also globally, on trying to move online and trying to transact online. And so a big beneficiary has been actually e-commerce and online platforms. And so whatever opportunities that might be explored in that area in terms of attracting private equity into that space, commercial funds into that space, might actually further benefit Africa's e-commerce space as well.
And finally, David, what are some of the key concerns that African countries would wish to be addressed as they seek to join or continue being members of the AIIB?
I think just responding to the two themes, which is essentially for Africa to enhance its own digital infrastructure. As you know, much as there has been a lot of growth in terms of connectivity, we haven't fully exploited the opportunities that this presents. And so that's certainly one of the big ones. Secondly is just to attract new private equity in terms of venture capital funds flow into African markets. We know that Africa right now, its big priority is on the enhancing intra-African trade. With Africa commencing its Africa-wide continental free trade area. And so investments that bridge this digital divide and enhance trade facilitation on the continent will always lead to enhancing development in the African continent.
All right, David Owiro in Nairobi, thank you for joining us. Meanwhile, the AIIB has created a COVID-19 crisis recovery facility to support its members in their efforts to alleviate financial and public health pressure created by the pandemic. The facility was established in April and will offer financial support until October 2021. About $5 to $10 billion will be given to public and private entities affected by the pandemic. The facility has approved 16 projects, releasing almost $6 billion benefiting 12 members, including China, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, and India. In Ethiopia, the Chinese government is scheduled to begin construction of the new headquarters of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Addis Ababa this year. African Union and Chinese government representatives have signed an agreement outlining the project details. Girum Chala tells us more.
The signing of the document between the African Union officials and Chinese authorities signals the start of the first phase of the implementation of the Africa CDC headquarters project. At the event, the head of the Chinese mission to the African Union, Ambassador Liu Yushi, and AUC Commissioner for Social Affairs, Amira El Fadil, have both said the start of the project is the realization of the support offered by President Xi Jinping to the continent.
Recently, Chinese President Xi Jinping, on a summit with African heads of state on the COVID-19 pandemic, said China will start the construction of the Africa CDC headquarters within the year. I believe this will enhance the China-Africa cooperation in the public health sector.
During the World Health Assembly, I was listening to his commitment, and he mentioned it in his speech that he's committing especially to the continuation of the building or of the construction of the building of the headquarters. And again, in the Africa-China Summit, he emphasized on this commitment that China is committed to finalize this project. So I do appreciate very much the role of His Excellency, the President of China.
A cornerstone blessing ceremony for the Africa Centers for Disease Control headquarters building took place in June last year here in Addis Ababa. And now that the project will kick off soon, the completion of the Africa CDC headquarters is expected to assist Africa in its fight against the COVID-19 pandemic.
We need a global solidarity. We need a solidarity with China, and we appreciate that China is supporting us from the beginning. Even before COVID-19, Africa have been receiving support from China in the establishment of Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention. There is a technical and financial support. There is experts from China supporting us. There is China CDC supporting Africa CDC. So we do appreciate very much this solidarity between China and Africa, and we want this solidarity to continue because the fight is far from over, unfortunately.
疫情还没有结束，仍然在世界各地肆虐的情况下。
At the moment, the pandemic is not over yet. The Chinese people will therefore continue supporting the African people. We had virtual meetings to share our experiences. We gave medical supplies to nearly all African countries. Our medical teams are co-working with their African counterparts to fight the pandemic. And the headquarters will be another great addition to the fight.
来共同的防治。
Upon completion, the Africa Centers for Disease Control headquarters in Addis Ababa will have a fully furnished emergency operations center, a laboratory, training center, a conference center, offices, expatriate apartments, and more. And the Africa CDC HQ is expected to be one of the greatest assets of Africa gifted by China. Grumtara CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
In its latest coronavirus briefing, the World Health Organization has warned against complacency in the Northern Hemisphere during this summer. A spokesperson from the WHO said the COVID-19 virus does not behave like influenza, which tends to follow seasonal trends. Tuli Shabalala has that update.
It's summer in the Northern Hemisphere. People in the UK, Spain and America are visiting beaches to help them cool off. But the world is still battling the coronavirus pandemic, and the World Health Organization says the hot weather has not been ruled out in the spreading of the virus.
There seems to be this persistent belief that summer is not a problem. Summer is a problem. This virus likes all weathers, but what it particularly likes is jumping from one person to another when we come in close contact. So let's not give it that opportunity. So the second wave idea, we are in the first wave. It's going to be one big wave. It's going to go up and down a bit. Now, the best thing is to flatten it and turn it into just something lapping at your feet.
The World Health Body says there have been more than 16 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 globally, with over 600,000 deaths.
What we all need to get our heads around is this is a new virus and it's behaving, even though it's a respiratory virus, and even though respiratory viruses in the past did tend to do this, different seasonal waves, this one is behaving differently. This one is one we have to be aware is learning about us as we're learning about it.
The WHO is encouraging nations to continue COVID-19 testing and has urged much greater adherence to physical distancing measures to stop the virus from spreading.
The season does not seem to be affecting the transmission of this virus currently. What is affecting the transmission of this virus is mass gatherings, is people coming together and people not social distancing, not taking the precautions to ensure they are not in close contact. So where people are in close contact, we are seeing intense transmission.
The US remains the worst affected, with nearly 4.5 million cases. Africa has over 700,000 recorded infections. But the respiratory illness continues to put health systems around the globe under pressure. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
This is Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's still ahead. West African regional leaders recommend the formation of a unity government to stabilize Mali. And Uganda puts more emphasis on stopping mother-to-child transmission to contain the spread of hepatitis B.
My family has been doing this artwork for the past 600 years.
My dream is to be the leading player in Africa in spice sector.
Nobody in the region consumes it. Even me cannot afford the vanilla cooking.
What we've created here is the elegance, the color, the celebration of life.
The West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, has proposed a four-point plan to resolve Mali's political crisis. ECOWAS says the plan should be implemented within 10 days, and it has threatened sanctions against anyone standing in the way. Tuli Shabalala has the details of those developments.
Members of the Economic Community of West African States engaged in a 3-hour video conference as Mali's political instability threatened to get out of hand. The West African leaders have now called for the swift creation of a unity government in Mali and a fresh vote after disputed elections. The leaders have warned of heavy consequences for those opposing efforts to end the country's crisis.
The establishment by the ECOWAS of a sanctions regime against those who take actions contrary to the resolution of this crisis.
The heads of the 15-nation regional bloc say Mali's democratic constitution has to be respected. In the proposal, the ministers in charge of defense, justice, foreign affairs, national security and finance should be nominated before the unity government is created. Since June, protesters have been calling for the resignation of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. The four-point proposals is similar to those previously made by ECOWAS's mission to Mali. Local media says the M5 RFP opposition coalition that has spearheaded the anti-Keïta demonstrations is not impressed by the ECOWAS proposals. But the coalition is in the process of reviewing the recommendations. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Earlier, we spoke to Dr. Dan Ekere, who is a lecturer at the University of Lagos in Nigeria. He says the formation of a unity government can help bring political stability in Mali.
We need to embrace, something of that kind, a unity government. Now, the challenge we have is that we practice a system of democracy, where the idea of opposition is revered. You have the government, you have the opposition. It is often said that in a democratic system, opposition is a key factor. But when you look at it carefully, this is more of a Western model. Must there always be opposition? What happens if both opposition and the others come together? Because you have a situation whereby in an election, for instance, out of 100%, a winner gets 60%. You want 60% votes. Now, are you saying the 40% are useless? Are you saying they don't have needs? Are you saying they are not, stakeholders? So that is a challenge we have. We've adopted this Western system where, the winner takes all, and you see the loser as one who has no interest, who should be fighting and looking for faults and error with whatever policies that the government in place is putting in place. But I am thinking that a unity government will bring about a scenario wherein all participants will be brought to bear such that, because don't forget that those who voted for the various people who contested whatever positions, even when they don't win, they have followers. And you cannot tell me that those followers are not important members of the society. Well, the interesting thing is that every election was, as a matter of fact, a function of, laws, a function of the constitution. The fact that there is a country called Mali, and they could have electoral system is a function of the constitution. So I'm not in support of any group undermining the constitution. However, the constitution, from all indication, has not forbidden everybody participating. And that is why the issue of a unity government is critical. I am thinking that everybody must see Mali as their own, and Mali must equally see everybody as participants. And in that case, there's a need for that unity government so that all shades of opinion can be taken care of until perhaps they are able to fine-tune all arrangements. All that is needed now is the will to execute this, because on both ends there are challenges. Those who are currently in position, they have their own issues. Those who have constituted themselves into opposition, they equally have their own issues. But the critical factor there is that the state must survive. And for the state to survive, there has to be peace. And for now, the only way to bring about that peace is for a unity government to be in place. However, those demands by the opposition that they must do away with so many of those, particularly the issue of resignation of IBK, I do not think that is going to work, because he's a duly elected president, and it will be difficult for him to just relinquish his mandate. So the best thing to do is, as ECOWAS has prescribed, let them form a unity government. In whatever percentage that has been agreed, that should be the issue to be discussed, and not a question of whether or not the president should be thrown out. That cannot be. It will mean there will be anarchy. So for me, a unity government is right in place, is the right idea.
Public health officials in Uganda say stopping the spread of hepatitis B through mother-to-child transmission should be a top priority. Immunization against the disease is only done 6 weeks after birth, putting the baby at risk of being infected. Peninah Karibe has this story.
Emmanuel Lutamaguzi has been living with hepatitis B for 3 years now. He doesn't know how he contracted it, but he suspects it was through sexual contact. Lutamaguzi says the discrimination against people living with hepatitis is frustrating. His positive status cost him his job.
When I tested positive, I knew that is one of the things that is going to happen. So it didn't hit me so hard, though it was an opportunity that I yearned for. But still, even in Uganda, I was already working. So I continued with my work, but also took it positive and decided to become an advocate for hepatitis, to become a voice for the voiceless, to also speak out publicly.
About 4.3% of Ugandans live with hepatitis B, according to the Ministry of Health. Hepatitis B can be transmitted through blood or sexual contact with an infected person. It can also be transmitted during the delivery process at birth. Hepatitis B is not curable, and people living with it are put on life-saving drugs to ensure the virus remains undetectable. The Minister of Health says over 90% of infections acquired at birth can become chronic and can lead to liver complications if not well managed. Public health specialists say there needs to be much more focus on the vaccination of newborns and the screening of pregnant women to prevent mother-to-child transmission.
The government of the Republic of Uganda is providing free vaccination even for adults. And this started in the highest burden districts of the north, West Nile, Lango, Acholi, Karamoja, Eastern, and they have actually finished all those areas. However, like you stated, the awareness levels towards this program have been so low. So even during the time the Ministry of Health was carrying out those programs in those areas, because of the low awareness, people didn't actually receive these services.
The World Health Organization recommends vaccination of newborns as the most effective way of preventing hepatitis B infection. Uganda's Ministry of Health now says there are plans to begin vaccinating newborn babies with the hepatitis B vaccine. Peninah Karibe, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
In Africa, there are over 850,000 cases of the coronavirus. In South Africa alone, more than 450,000 cases have been recorded. This includes at least 7,000 deaths since the first case was detected in March this year. After lockdown regulations were eased, infections rose sharply, placing the country as one of the world's hardest hit nations. Sumitra Naidu has that report.
South Africa recorded over 11,000 new COVID cases in the last 24 hours. Since the government eased lockdown restrictions in June, there's been a steady rise in new infections.
We started off well with the lockdown. We started by closing the schools. I think we did everything right. However, as we opened things up, things got a little more complicated. I think our biggest crisis right now is that half the problem is that we are not taking it seriously now.
Our lockdown has helped to reduce the spread of the virus. Reducing the spread does not mean that the virus will not be there. I think in our opening up and sort of like reducing the restrictions, that is where we somewhat, I can't say failed because that is really a wrong word to say, but we somehow overlooked that there was a possibility of community spread, which could have somehow have been somehow reduce the cases.
South Africa was praised for its swift lockdown, but now there's concerns the country's high infection rate will spread to the rest of Africa.
South Africa also has a very different situation from countries like in Europe, for instance. Our reality is that the majority of places, the majority of citizens in the country are poor, and they live in environments where social distancing, at least at home, is impossible, and in places where running water often isn't available.
The rapid rise in infections prompted the president to ban alcohol sales for a second time and order all public schools to close for the next 4 weeks.
It takes one person, technically, can spread the infection to between 2 and 3 people. So we're talking about the infection rate, the reproductive rate, about 2.5. So in one person, if that person doesn't get sick or doesn't get tested, in 30 days, by spreading it out like that, one person can be responsible for almost 400 infections.
Unfortunately, we're also dealing with COVID-related stigma and testing backlogs, which means that many people infected with the coronavirus don't end up in quarantine facilities in time because they get back their test results too late, or they are reluctant to go because of stigma or poverty.
South Africa is now firmly in the eye of the storm. The peak is expected by September. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A reminder of our top stories. President Xi Jinping says China will continue to pursue development with the rest of the world. The Chinese president was speaking at the annual board meeting of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB, which is online this year because of COVID-19. The World Health Organization has warned against complacency in measures to contain COVID-19 in the Northern Hemisphere during summer. A spokesperson from the WHO said the coronavirus does not behave like influenza, which tends to follow seasonal trends. And the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, has proposed a 4-point plan to resolve Mali's political crisis. ECOWAS says the plan, which includes the formation of a unity government, should be implemented within 10 days. It has threatened sanctions against anyone standing in the way. Time now to catch up with the day's business news. We join Uche for the latest.
Thanks, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. An independent review clears president of the African Development Bank, Akiwumi Adesina. And 90% of chief executives in South Africa invest in new technology, but can't access the right talent.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, a much-awaited report by an independent review panel has completely exonerated the president of the African Development Bank, Akiwumi Adesina, of any ethical wrongdoings. Now, the distinguished three-member review panel was set up by the Bureau of Governors of the bank. It followed a complaint by the United States to review the process by which two previous organs of the bank, that's the Ethics Committee and the board, as well as the Bureau of the Board of Governors, had exonerated Adesina. Back in January 2020, 16 allegations of ethical misconduct were leveled against Adesina by a group of whistleblowers. And moving on now, the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown regulations imposed since March have devastated the South African tourist accommodation sector. Now, income has decreased by about 98% as of May 2020. That's compared with May 2019. Here's Angela Coppola with more on those recovery plans.
The situation is disastrous for the South African tourism sector. Seasonally adjusted income from accommodation decreased by 96.8% in April and by another 20.7% in May. And the relaxation of regulations to allow domestic business travel hasn't had any meaningful impact either.
Hotels are operating at less than 4%. So it means that there isn't anything that's flowing into hotels. In fact, many hotels are still not open because it's just not worth it to operate a large property, for 4% occupancy. It makes no sense. So as much as, we do appreciate the business travel being open, it will be better complemented by the opening of leisure travel and also allowing people to cross provincial borders.
The restaurant sector is also in turmoil. The issue is the alcohol sales ban and the nighttime curfew, and the lack of clear communication between government and the industry.
There's a complete inability to work with us to look at solutions. If you can't lift the liquor ban, then help us financially. If you don't have funding and there's no resources, look at the components that you can give us relief on. What is the deciding factor in a restaurant to keep it open or closed? It is the lease. So help us with the leases. Allow our businesses to stay open and allow both the landlord to benefit and ourselves to keep doors open and keep people employed. So we put this in a memorandum where we wrote to the president.
The tourism and hospitality sectors are ready to welcome guests back. Safety protocols have been implemented that equal or surpass what other open economic sectors have introduced.
Demand is going to be a challenge. But it's better to look for customers than not to operate at all. We know how to do that, and we know how to do that safely. And another thing that's important, we have developed protocols that ensures that tourism is conducted in a safe way, just like many other sectors across South Africa and many other sectors in the world.
The restaurant sector has morphed itself several times during the lockdown.
First, we have been made into delivery services, then into takeaways. Then we had to become bottle stores. Then we had to become bottle stores with coffee shops. Then the minute we started getting people back into our restaurants, they cut the curfew. And at every single turn, there's a challenge every day that the restaurant sector's met with.
The devastation has been significant. In the tourism sector alone, it's estimated that some 300,000 jobs have already been lost. In the restaurant industry, the number of shuttered-up shops is silent testimony to the damage that's been caused. Business owners simply want to start operating with all the right protocols in place. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Parkhurst, South Africa.
Now, apparently South Africa is still lagging behind most nations in its readiness for the fourth industrial revolution. According to new research, over 90% of company executives in Africa's most industrialized economy say that they've invested in new technology. However, not all companies have advanced engineering talent. CGTN Sumitra Naidu now reports.
The Johannesburg Center for Africa-China Studies hosted a webinar around gearing Africa for the fourth industrial revolution. The discussion was based on the latest Global Human Capital Trends report by Deloitte, which found that having adequate and skills-appropriate levels of education is essential.
Looking into the reality of the African labor market, that most of them are informal workers. About 70% of them are self-employed workers. It's important that whatever technology that we come up with, these workers are integrated instead of being displaced. And that here the question of skills is important.
Many, though, are concerned that digital transformation will increase inequality as new technologies will replace people.
Unemployment remains a scourge. Economic growth remains lackluster. and poverty seeps through every nation. This, however, need not be our reality, which calls for the establishment of the National Artificial Intelligence Institute that focuses on the application of AI in health, agriculture, finance, mining, manufacturing, and government, as well as regulation.
Experts agree that education will be key.
We are partnering with 400 universities to develop what we call the Huawei ICT Academy in Africa. We have 15,000 students receive the training from our side. And also we provide the global ICT competition. So each year there's around 80,000 African students to join this program.
The World Economic Forum estimates that 133 million new jobs will be created in major economies, jobs that will meet the demands of the fourth industrial revolution as early as 2022.
To date, we've seen over 40,000 unique viewers interacting with this digital platform. 400 organizations have already registered, over 5,000 young people across 2 regions. 1,500 of them have continued their education, 2,000 have been placed in jobs. And particularly for me, 150 have started their own businesses, and we're looking to see how we can scale those initiatives.
To ensure people around the world are not left behind, governments, businesses and society will need to partner to ensure maximum impact. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And in Egypt, a livestock market has witnessed huge crowds to buy sacrificial cows and sheep ahead of the annual Eid al-Adha holiday. Now, the festival of sacrifice is one of the 2 major holy days observed by Muslims across the world. But market traders say business this year has slowed down due to the coronavirus restrictions. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro reporting.
Hundreds of Egyptians defied government warnings over the coronavirus to crowd a vast seasonal livestock market near the capital without wearing face masks a week before the Muslim Eid al-Adha holiday. The Al-Manashi livestock market in Giza is usually crowded with sellers and buyers before Eid, and the pandemic did not reduce their numbers, but few had much money to spend.
I came here to buy a sacrificial lamb, but I found that it's too expensive for me and I won't be able to buy it with the money that I have. I was planning on paying $187 that I have with me, but could not find something that I can buy with this amount of money. Last year when I had more money, I could even buy with as much as $312. I didn't have a problem with money. But this year, because of the coronavirus from February until July, business is slowing down for everyone.
My name is Mohammed Samir from the Al-Manashi livestock market, and things are at a standstill this year. A kilo of livestock is worth around $3 this year, and there aren't any people buying or selling. Last year, the same kilo was selling at around $3.40 and it was being sold. But this year, it's because of the coronavirus and all the problems that it has caused.
On top of the constrained spending, traders also say that local authorities were carrying out periodic raids to disperse crowds for fear they could spread the disease. Government's efforts have reflected a positive downward infection rate. Even with more than 92,000 registered coronavirus infections, including more than 4,600 deaths, daily case numbers have been declining over the past 2 weeks, and officials hope that the upcoming holiday season will not reverse the decline. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, that is all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up later on Global Business Africa, Egypt and Sudan criticize Ethiopia as a new round of talks over the Grand Renaissance Dam kickoff. Of course, we'll bring you more on that at top of the hour. For now, it is back to Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead. Female African filmmakers document women's experiences during COVID-19 lockdowns on the continent.
Africa. Chachi koko kwarase ati akukukuante. Kam kai.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Female African filmmakers have come up with a series of hard-hitting films to document the experiences of women during COVID-19 lockdowns. Gender-based violence has emerged as one of the biggest challenges for women who are spending most of their time at home with little protection against abusive partners. Julie Shire chats to two of the filmmakers.
Trapped in their homes with nowhere else to turn in the COVID-19 pandemic. Johannesburg filmmaker Aurelie Stratton's I'll Call You Later is a powerful account of life in lockdown for women in abusive relationships.
Joe seems to have a good life, but you know, with abuse there's a cycle where you kind of feel that you deserve the abuse you're getting, so you're not going to tell anyone about it. So they often lie about it because it's a cycle, because you get worn down by your abuser. It's not just physical abuse, it's emotional and mental abuse. So I wanted to make it clear that she was lying about it, that nobody really knew about it, and she was hiding it from the world.
I'll call you later. Across the continent in Kenya, Wamboi Gati tells a similar story in her movie Love, Sawadi.
Women are ultimately forced to either end their lives, or they're constantly contemplating on ways to stop this. So it's either I stop that man from continuing with what he's doing, or I basically end my life. So there's that dilemma where you find yourself in, and that's what we actually addressed in the film. But then we left it as an open-ended, where you're not sure whether Zawadi is going to take her life, or she's going to take matters in her hands and kill her abuser.
COVID-19 has heightened many harsh realities faced by women in Africa. Diminishing economic opportunity is taking its toll. Mental and physical strain has set in, and gender-based violence remains a serious concern.
If you look at the whole lockdown, where people are literally forced to stay indoors, and you're not even sure whether you're safer indoors or are you safer outside, because there are cases of women being physically attacked by it's either their husband or their uncle or their father. There's also sexual violence as well that's happening, and the cases have really been rising ever since this whole COVID thing came about.
We need to stand up against violence. We need to stand up. We need to use our voices and stop it. And only if we do that collectively can we do that. And I also feel, you know, women need to stand together. That's the most important thing, because traditionally women squabble, women bring each other down, and I think together as a united force we are so much better.
Crime has shown a general drop because of limited movement during lockdown, but violence against women has surged in many African countries. These female filmmakers are hoping their work will give women a voice and highlight their hardships, which often remain behind closed doors. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A square on Senegal's Gorée Island, which for centuries served as a way station in the transatlantic slave trade, has a new name. It will now be known as Freedom and Human Dignity Square, as a number of African countries consider ridding their cities of colonial street labels. Here's more on that story.
Gorée Island authorities unanimously adopted the draft deliberation on renaming one of its main squares. The decision was made during a meeting of the Municipal Council, which took place in late June. The move is in solidarity with Black Lives Matter protests that have been taking place all over the world. Europe Square will now bear the name Freedom and Human Dignity Square.
As the municipality managing an exceptional World Heritage Site that is the symbol of the suffering of black men in general, it's good to know that Gorée crystallizes the memory
of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery.
Donc, nous sommes dit qu'il fallait faire quelque chose.
We welcome this gesture, which is a strong symbol and is linked to the case of George Floyd in the United States. It must be said that the installation of the so-called Europe Square had aroused much indignation within the community.
The square's previous name, Europe Square, was considered by many to be insensitive given the island's history of slavery. The residents of Gorée Island have responded positively over the name change.
We commend our authorities for this initiative. This project has been underway for a long time. It has finally come to fruition.
I am proud of the name change of this place, as we are talking about human dignity. I can only congratulate those who came up with the idea, because Gorée is a place of memory where human dignity has been violated for centuries.
The date for the inauguration is, however, yet to be set because of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Coming up in sports. Real Madrid prepare for UEFA Champions League despite registering a positive COVID-19 case.